Madam Secretary, it's a great honor to host you here in Warsaw, and thank you very much for all you are doing for Katowice COP24. I know that you have an extremely busy schedule just before this very important meeting for us, but we expect also to be instrumental in helping all parties getting an agreement in Katowice. But I think it's a good opportunity also for all of us, well, to think a little bit ahead and because it's very tempting sometimes, as you explained also when we met, to stop at short term and next immediate action. But then we somehow lose the horizon from the perspective. And when we need, I think, to talk about the future and a better future, and we, if as Walt Disney said, if you can imagine it, you can achieve it. Yes. So please help us imagine a better future, how it should look like if we need to incorporate all our climate and environmental imperatives.
Well, thank you for having me, and Katowice is going to be an important milestone in looking to the future. In 2015, the Paris Agreement was looking into the future. It was recognizing that unless we took action as a generation now in reinforcing our foundations, turning to a new face of taking care of our home, the planet, we would be in not a good place. And so we really came out with a very good agreement. I think we have an excellent roadmap. So thinking about the future is not as difficult as it would have been if we didn't come together to say this is the roadmap. As we think to the future, it's good to say in 2050, what would we like to see the world looking like? So look back from 2050, that way we can probably achieve it. And I think we do want to see a number of enablers in the world that will reinforce the aspirations we have to find a balance between what we do as human beings and how we take care of the planet, the home that we live in. And some of those enablers, I think today, are being neglected or not connected to that vision. For example, education. Education needs to be rethought in a way in which it gives skills to young people, even to old people, because quite frankly, we're going to be living longer, to find a way of imagining the tools that we will need so that we can actually reduce the emissions that we have, find better ways of living that do less harm to our immediate environment. It'll also be, I think, about the conversations that we have with those who represent us. So when we think about the parliaments, where here they are custodians of democracy, reinforced by a good, of course, executive that will take out those instructions, but protected too by the rule of law and things that allow us to adhere to human rights. So let's say that all those pieces need to come together, but it is in the parliament where a robust discussion needs to happen about the types and ways of life that we should have in 2050 that help us with urbanization. If we're going to live in cities, how will we feed ourselves? How will we transport ourselves? How will we educate ourselves? What will be the balance in trying to reduce the inequalities for those that have and those that don't have? How will we create a good umbilical cord, a synergy between the rural and the urban? And I think in 2050, we should have resolved those problems. That's what I see. And I see that in a way in which we try to be more on the third issue, think about resources, the means of implementation. How can we be more equitable about the way we unlock resources in innovative ways to find investments for young people to do a lot of this, for governments to achieve the scale. So today we may be embarking upon an industrialization program that sees much more growth in our economy, that allows us to pay for services and the things that our people need. But those investments need partners, and those partners need to help unlock those resources that we need for it. How do we do that? There are many policies and there are many political hurdles that we have to struggle to do it. So I would see that the financing, the means of implementation, how do we unlock more of those resources to make that happen? Not just in developed countries, but also in developing countries. but towards one interest, not to have this divide that has kept us with aspirations to be developed. I think the universal agenda of the SDGs means that we all have the same problems to different degrees. And what we want to do is to try to do things better together, because borders matter. But at the same time, it's this human family. And within a human family, essentially there are no borders, there are core values. So, you know, projecting what we do with technology, how we live our life 2050 back, I think at the end of the day is about, you know, who we are, where we're coming from, what we want to be.
Thank you very much. It's a lot about Katowice, because when we are talking about means of implementation, we are at the heart of Katowice and about the heart of implementation of principles agreed in the Paris Agreement. When we are talking about innovation and technology, we are also talking about Katowice, exactly. When we are talking about democracy, dialogue, we are talking about bringing regulation to regulations to the world and to individual countries. And then again, we are in the framework of Katowice. And I think that you are also bringing another fourth dimension, which is societal change. Educated people, but also to incorporate in our lives these values of caring for planet, caring for environment, caring for one another. And having innovation, technology, finance, and societal going together, I hope the world will be better. I hope we will be able to achieve SDGs as you are fighting for them greatly. But at the same time, 30 years, it's only 30 years.
It's not far.
It's not far. So what in practice, what can be the achievable in all these dimensions in a practical way, what we can see also?
I think it's important to show what is possible, because then the impossible can be done. Access to clean energy is essential, and by then everyone should have access to that, on or off grid. It is possible, the technology is there, but we have to open up those pathways to making that happen, so the person in a village can have access to power, whether it is for a child to have an opportunity for education, the hookup to the internet, to know that knowledge is shared from local to global and global to local. So that will make a huge difference in people's lives. So that's one practical thing. I think that we should think about the way in which, as you have done, transport ourselves, mobility. For people to know that they are part of connecting one another, with one another through transportation, through different forms of mobility without doing harm is also possible. And that's about bringing technology and the issue of batteries to cars or to mass transportation. That's important, and I think that that's a tangible.
And if you allow, I participated just 2 days ago at the launching of World Energy Outlook.
Yes.
And one of the important data which was shown by Fatih Birol was that the number of people without access to energy fell below 1 billion. It's felt, but it's still a huge challenge for us. And when I look also the example of Poland, we transitioned in a very quick way the last 30 years. And we moved from a country which was relatively backwarded in the developed world. For example, there was only cash. We didn't have cards, we didn't have checks. And we jumped immediately into the world of credit cards. And that transformed Poland in a very interesting manner to a hub of innovation around fintech industry. And this is what I think also about what you mentioned, electromobility. It can have a leapfrog effect for a number of rural areas in the world where they do not have access to electricity, but they already start to have a solar panel, and then they can not only charge their phones, the immediate make sure that the immediate surrounding are workable in terms of electricity, but also maybe have some kind of connection to mobility. So there is this invitation in technology for leapfrog effect, for innovation and for inspiration and imagination.
But it has to be inclusive. I mean, one of the things that we're speaking about today, the Secretary General is very passionate about addressing artificial intelligence and technology, the frontier issues as we talk about. But we have to make sure we don't leave women behind, we don't leave young people who are in poorer countries behind, that accessibility means beyond an urban center. And that, you know, today we see that you engage with the market, you don't need to be in a shop or on a factory floor. You can actually be in your home. And I think that, you know, goes to the question also on the social side. As you socialize what it is you want to see in 2050, what sort of lifestyles should we really be thinking about? As people grow older, as the population grows larger, and as time is freed up, because technology takes an awful lot of the things that we do today, how do we find that work-life balance, and what does that entail in the way in which we consume? And I think that's something to really hand in terms of a baton to young people, to mobilize thought leadership around and say, what should it be like? I mean, this is what is missing, I think, today, is that where is the thought leadership about the future that you want in real terms, country by country, village by village, and that in itself becomes an incredible tapestry of diversity. Everybody will say different things. How can we make that a strength and not a weakness? Because today what we see is intolerance, is discrimination, is fear, it's a lack of knowledge. So many things that are not so positive, and yet we should look at them as a challenge to finding the solutions. Katowice says that to us. It says we have a plan that we ignited in Paris. And I think, as you mentioned just earlier, you talked about a seed being sown. And so how do you nurture that so that you grow from that seed into a small plant, into a big tree, and into many? And I think that that's what Katowice is about, is that to continue not to see that seed that was sown die. And we should be very clear. It is for us to nurture.
Exactly.
Or not.
And the Paris Agreement also provides us with the vision of climate-neutral society by the second half of 21st century. Yeah. And that's a number of challenges, very practical challenges for energy sector, for transport sector, for agriculture, for building sector. How can we imagine these sectors I think, first of all, the narrative for economic growth has to change. When you sit down with a country and you are speaking to the SDGs, it should not be something you add on. I believe that every country is already implementing the SDGs. We just don't call it that. But if you look at the budget of a country where they invest for their people, you will see demonstrated the SDGs. However, you will also see the gaps. And acknowledging that the gaps are there, articulating them, and then looking for how you leverage the support to fill those gaps. So it is about a sustainable future, but the core of it will be where you put your money. And where you put your money is where people believe that that investment will work, and they will bring more. It requires different capacities, different mindsets. It requires for those who are running financial systems to think differently. For me, I think that what we have now is a great deal of professional inertia. We have the skills better than we've ever had before. We have technology. We have youthful population. I mean, this is the largest cohort of young people we've ever had in the world. So we don't have an excuse. There is energy, there is vision. We need to bring it together and then, really focus it. And as I said before, all fingers on a hand are not equal. And I think we need to respect that, and we need to work towards helping countries with transitions. The Secretary General of the United Nations talks about prevention. He said in every way we must prevent crisis.
and we must prevent going back once we have found peace into conflict. But then he talks about the transitions. And the transitions can be in anything, can be from crisis to peace, can be from a brown economy to a green economy, can be from one where you say you want to attain zero tolerance of violence against women. That's a transition. All of these take time. And at the root of it, we have to go back to our core values. We have to go back to who we are as human beings, this incredible family. But at the moment, it's being tested. And I think that another message for Katowice is about how we can do things better together. And that when we see the partnerships that we can create, South-South, North-South, North-North, means we must invest more in research and development. We must invest more in, there is no good that you talk about the North and access with technology. Your partner's in the South and needs to have technology, and so therefore paying for a service means that they should also be part of financial inclusion. If they don't have an account, they must have access, as we've seen in East Africa with what they've done with money and phones. So the future is incredibly bright, but it doesn't come automatically. You have to work for it. And for young people in an age of technology where everything is push a button or tweet, we have to explain to them that this is a journey. And that journey is only as good as each step you take. And in every step, you've got to put your best foot forward. So Katowice, here we come.
Secretary General, it's a great pleasure to have you here again, and thank you very much for your leadership. Thank you for your continuous efforts to make Katowice a success. So we will meet there and we will be able to continue this very interesting conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.